Hello, Defender family. This is a Swad Walker Associate Editor. Um, we are here with Jacqueline Ludo and Courtney Litvak. They will be discussing some critically important no trafficking zone legislation. There's breaking news and a really important vote that is coming up real soon that you need to know about. So, first of all, thank both of you for giving us your time this evening.
Thanks for having us. Thank you so much for having us. We really, really appreciate it.
No problem, no problem. So, Mr. Ludo, can you give the name of the organization that you are with? I know you've done a whole lot of work with um, with the Reverend. Why can I not remember his name all
Oh,
of a
Bishop
sudden?
Dixon? Yeah.
Yes, Lord have mercy.
Yes, I'm the president of an organization called No Trafficking Zone. It is a nonprofit organization that is bipartisan, and our goal is to prevent and combat domestic minor sex trafficking across our nation.
Would you mind just giving a brief overview as to how you even came about getting involved in this movement?
Sure. Well, it was on accident. 20 some years ago, I was producing a documentary called Not in My Backyard. It was about battered women and their children seeking refuge in a country that really wasn't recognizing that it was happening here. And what happened is I ended up spending 7 years filming, going across America in different cities and states, finding that there were children in the foster care system and runaways that were being labeled as child prostitutes and were being bought and sold and did not even realize that they were victims of commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking, and not even understanding that children can't be prostitutes.
Exactly.
And so that led me on the journey of 20 years later, just still continuing in the fight against human trafficking.
And it's my understanding that Houston is like a national hotspot for this horrific crime, right?
Yes, Houston is one of the largest hubs for sex trafficking.
Okay. And Ms. Litvak, how did you get involved with this movement?
Well, unfortunately, my story was from firsthand experience. My family and I am from Houston, Texas, and I grew up in a suburb of Houston called Katy, Texas. And that is where I was first approached on my school campus by people who were working for nefarious individuals that were former graduates or fellow peers, current athletes, and people who were my classmates who introduced me into the world of sex trafficking.
See, when you say that, because I've read that before, and when you say it, that's kind of mind blowing because no one is thinking that students, high school students, are actually being used to groom and traffic other minors into this whole sex trafficking thing.
Absolutely. But what's even sadder is actually now they are targeting younger and younger youth and children in junior high. And the youngest child, unfortunately, who was falling victim and being groomed by a recruiter for a human trafficker was a fifth grader. So this is not just impacting high school students like myself. And this did not just happen to me first. This had been going on for decades in the school system, but even in my hometown. This had been happening on school campuses long before it happened to me, and it has continued to grow into a larger and worse problem by the day because schools are so in fear of taking accountability because they care about liability. But when people sign up and say that they are going to protect children at all costs and they take an oath for their job or elected position or a superintendent, their first priority should be protecting kids at all costs, no matter what that could mean. And for them, we just shared with them that there were so many gaps many students had been falling through for a very long time as human trafficking intersects with many other issues plaguing our schools today, but that human trafficking was the number 1 issue that has been arising in schools over the years and has only grown into a bigger beast. And that is why we must combat it now, because I
Yeah,
know firsthand how big of an issue it is.
we're going to get to the legislation that is up for a vote, but I need to ask one more question, Ms. Litvak. So when you were approached, when folk were trying to recruit you, do you mind sharing how you responded? What happened after that?
Sure. And I really believe in sharing teachable moments to be able to shine a light on how this happens because it's so much more simple than people people believe. And it's a lot more conspicuous. It's very low key. And that's another thing, is like people don't even resonate, especially people at that level and that age, with the term trafficker, human trafficking. We know people as pimps, or we know people, as fellow peers who we entrust, but are maybe get dragged up into the wrong crowd of people. And so it was fellow upperclassmen who had approached me once I had actually fallen victim to another crime at my school that they unfortunately covered up, and was directly the cause to me being introduced to my first pimp as a minor in school, as a junior, but was through social media, how they were able to contact me even when I wasn't in school. That was how they kept a line of constant communication open, to have constant access to me, to invest that time and build that trust and that relationship, and also to find my vulnerabilities to be able to then turn them against me and blackmail me, posing as somebody people who wanted to come in to befriend me and help me when I became extremely susceptible to being targeted at my school, because I was already facing other abuses and things that the school was covering up. And I continued to just fall deeper and deeper into this hole, which eventually led me to be trafficked across the country during my senior year of high school.
Man, that is absolutely tragic. I'm sorry, Mr. Ludo. You were about to
No,
say
and
something?
I wanted to just also reaffirm what Courtney was saying about that this has been happening for years. There is database evidence, studies that have been taken in all different states. In California, 20 San Diego County high schools that participated in a study all confirmed that recruitment was happening with their students. Of those schools, 18 of those schools documented cases of sex trafficking. 140 staff members from 20 of those high schools identified 80 reported victims, along with 54 suspected victims. And it gets worse. They also identified 17 recruiters that were targeting their school campuses. From that study, they also found that in 2015, between 8,000 to 11,000 victims, mostly underage girls, were trafficked in San Diego each year. And most of those girls came from schools. That just shows how pervasive that is. Detective Wolf out of Virginia said that in every school, law enforcement has identified in Virginia, their middle schools and their high schools, sex trafficking, grooming, recruiting, and luring in them. And so I want to read you just a little story, because people are going to go.
Before you read the story, I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. You said in every high school and middle school.
Yes. And
Okay,
I can send you the links to this database research that we're sending senators. And these are studies that are going back 2015, 2019, 2020, 2013, and it's gradually gotten worse.
Yes.
Principals, superintendents from Missouri, from Ohio, saying pimping and trafficking and recruiting is out of control on our school systems. We need help. The FBI in those states and cities verifying this, saying that this has become a preying ground for commercial sexual exploitation and sex trafficking is schools. And as Courtney has said before, most parents think that their kids are safe at school. So they send their kids to school, but that's where groomers and traffickers and recruiters know they can get to your kids at school.
Yes, and to that is exactly correct. And what I've shared and what Jacqueline's alluding to is that my traffickers, my pimps, felt more comfortable and safer coming to pick me up off of school property during school hours and return me back to class to interact with me. And I was leading a double life before I would return home that day, versus risking my parents' wrath. They were more in fear of my parents and picking me up in the middle of the night than they were coming in broad daylight. Like we say, this happens right in plain sight. During school hours from my school campus is where they felt the safest to be able to conduct the business and carry out the plans that they had for me and other individuals they were targeting.
This is insane. This is insane. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, and so I want to read this because parents are like, well, how does this happen? So this is one story out of New York, because in the evidence that I'm going to send you is 10 states. We picked different states for different locations so that people can't say this is just happening in one part of our nation. And so it says, walking through the streets of Queens, New York, with her two best friends at the age of 12, Melanie Thompson was being assessed. Two boys from her neighborhood, a few years older but familiar faces from the middle school, made a calculation and invited the girls indoors. It was really innocent at first, she recalled. We were joking around. They gave us alcohol and I ended up blacking out. When I woke up, my two girlfriends were gone. I was being raped by one of the boys. Melanie tried to find her clothes and to escape from the basement, but she was trapped by an older man who then entered. And that is when my trafficking started. He told me I was going nowhere, she reported to Telegraph, waiving her right to anonymity because she wanted her story to be told. As a punishment, when she tried to escape through the window, Melanie's was burnt with cigarettes to her face and her body. Again,
Uh-oh. I don't know if you can hear me, but you are breaking up. Hello? I don't know if y'all can hear me on my screen. Both of you are frozen and I can't hear anything.
Okay, can you hear us now?
I
Sorry.
can. Not a problem. The last thing I heard you say was the young lady was trying to escape and they were burning her with cigarettes to her face and the rest of her body.
Yes. And the message that they gave her was if she tried to escape again, not only would they kill her, but they knew where her sister went to school, the friends that she hung out with, and what she liked. And so that talks about peer on peer exploitation, that these boys had planned it, even with some of the girlfriends, maybe not understanding or knowing the magnitude. And then the kids are afraid to tell law enforcement when a friend goes missing or something happens because they're afraid that they're going to get in trouble. Yes. But how organized crime works, whether it's gangs, whether it's these larger CEO traffickers, whether it's your Romeo pimps that are more the boyfriends, they are systematic. They know the schools inside and out. It is a system and it is a model that has been working well over a decade. And so looking at all these reports and case studies is if we know that this has been happening for over a decade, why do we not put laws in place? So one of the things that the senator said is, well, judges have the discretion, they can convict someone to up to 100 years, but judges aren't doing that. And because youth do not want to identify as victims or they are afraid and they do not outcry, we need to make crimes against children on school campuses, such as this, a federal crime. Because when we make it a federal crime, we tell traffickers and predators, you are going to have to pay for your crime in a very horrific way. So whatever the profit is, because it could be between $300,000 to $700,000 for selling a young girl, you would not want to go into federal prison for 15 years. And we are asking that both parties come together, so politics aside, put humanity first and our children first in all communities, and say enough is enough. And these punishments have to really match what these horrific crimes are.
So HR 7566 was just passed by the U.S. House. Is that what that particular legislation is asking for, what you just said?
Yeah, so HR 7566 was carried in the House by Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee and Congressman McCaul. And now it's Senate Bill SB 5226, which is carried by Senator Cornyn and Senator Klobuchar. But they can't get it to be heard for the Judiciary Committee because Senator Dick Durbin out of Chicago, Illinois, is the chair, and he has some questions about the bill.
Okay, I'm gonna come back to that. But in terms of HR 7566 passing, what was your initial response when you heard that news?
We knew that only God could have done it.
Yeah.
in the way and in the timing that it happened. It was nothing short of miraculous, and it gave us
Yes.
great encouragement that we are not alone in this fight. But when you're fighting for something as important as human rights and the sanctity of human life and our children and their future, you will come up against great pushback and flaming arrows from the enemy, and we were prepared for that. And so we prayed hard, we fought hard, and we didn't give up, like the Congresswoman says. And seeing
Yeah.
it through, it was so rewarding and such a blessing to see God move and pass it through the House.
Yeah. And
And you said,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Ms. Litvak, you just said that this was a move of God. What was it about this time that made it such a miraculous happening?
Also, something we were even just smiling and laughing about before coming on this interview with you is we're like, if people could only imagine what it really looks like behind the scenes. You're not always up in DC and on the House floor and with the senators and with people. No, it's the people who are fighting in the things that people will never see that happen behind closed doors. The phone calls at 4 a.m.
Yes.
God only knows. And the Congresswoman and some other people, because they're there on the other side of that call. The work doesn't stop. And being here on the front lines, we're constantly reminded of why this is so important and that this is life and death legislation for these kids, but for our communities and for our world and our future. This is so much bigger than even just for every school. This is for every life and every family, and for where do we want this country to be in the future? And who do we want to be? And on what side of history are we going to be able to say we stood for and stood on in the time such as this? And so it was just such a miracle to see that only God could have moved it the way he did, but also knowing that when you don't give up and you know you're fighting for something that is so worth fighting for, and that's what these kids are, they deserve and are so worth being fought for to the tooth and nail. And we have gone to hell and back, and we're prepared to do it all over again, and whatever that takes to pass this into federal law.
Yeah. And I think, a big thing, like we were praying so much, is because, slavery, and people talk about it, but this is slavery of our time. It's so profitable. It is so profitable, and it's so hard to convict. And so a lot of people that used to sell drugs now sell people, because the penalty for selling drugs is a lot higher than selling people. And so when you have a business that's $150 billion business and it makes more money than the oil industry and Nike alone, it just shows you how many people are profiting and participating in it. So how many people would not want this bill to go through? Because people say, well, this is a no-brainer, this bill.
As
But
it should be.
when you understand that this is one of the largest illicit crimes in the world and how much money it makes, just how big that enemy and that mountain is. We were on Capitol Hill when the bill passed. We were in DC, and I remember being on the House floor crying, thanking God, because we knew that, this could only be him to really come forward and move our kids. And we were proud of our nation that people on both sides of the party could finally come together.
Yes.
And work together. We're so used to now having a divided nation and a divided government that it was nice for once to see our elected officials and leaders come together and agree on something, that our children are more important than everything.
So the next step is Senate Bill 5226. First question, what's the likelihood of it passing? Second question, what on earth could be a reason for a U.S. senator to vote against it?
Well, the likelihood of it passing is a miracle, because we need Senator Durbin to either finally see why it's so important and for it to be heard within the next week, or for it to be put in the omnibus, which then we really think should be equally as important. And that means that you have really 4 leaders in our nation that really agree to things like that, specific bills being put in. And so it's a miracle from God, but then it's also people writing to Senator Durbin, writing to Senator Schumer,
Yes.
who is the most powerful senator in
The Senate.
in the Senate, yeah, and saying we need this bill passed. Why Senator Durbin is saying it, we've heard from all of our leaders that have participated in the bill that the things that they wanted to add weren't reasons enough to stop the bill from being passed.
Which begs a bigger question that we're still asking that question. Why on earth would anybody want to oppose a bill that is so simplistically put just to protect children's lives?
Yeah,
Why?
that's the question that I have. And I mean, I even knew before I asked that you wouldn't have an answer. The only folk that could answer that are those who would dare vote against it. Is there anything else that you would like for Defender readers, website viewers to know about where this is and what they can do in order to help the process move forward?
They can call Senator Dick Durbin's office and even write him and email him, and Senator Schumer's. They can retag and post what NTZ is putting out on Instagram, tagging Senator Durbin and Senator Schumer to say, hey, this bill is important, not just to Chicago because he's out of Chicago, but really to our nation. Because these kids are moved around. You know, when Courtney was groomed and trafficked, she always didn't stay in the state of Texas. When all these girls and boys that have been trafficked from their schools, they're being moved around from different states. So we need our nation to say we need hard punishments against predators that are preying on our children and our youth.
Do you have a website or social media where folk can go to learn more about this?
Yes, on Facebook, it's No Trafficking Zone. Sorry, I have to check. And on Instagram, it's no Trafficking Zone. And I can also send you the handles.
Okay, great. Well, again, thank you both, unless you have one last thing you wanted to add.
Anything else you want to add?
Well, I want to just highlight something that you said and speak to a little bit more. It's the fact that this is so shocking for so many people. But what's even more shocking is for people to say that they're claimed to be experts of this crime and could have been in this space for so many years to see the cases. We've seen the cases. We're working these cases. A lot of federal agencies are working this case. I mean, it's a known fact. So it's like aren't we already so far past the point of even asking the question, is trafficking happening in schools? We're so far past that. But then also we need to move people out of shock and into action. Because it can be so easy, and I validate that. I validate how it can be paralyzing to realize this is happening and be like, is anywhere safe? If school's not safe, that's the one place my parents thought I was safe at, and that's the place that the traffickers and pimps felt comfortable coming up and conducting their business without any fear of consequences. So it's increasing penalties, but it's also increasing awareness and boldness, and praying for our nation's leaders to lead with a heart of wanting to say, what is God's will for this country and for his children? We need to start putting something so much bigger than us first. And that is a cause such as this to combat domestic child trafficking in the United States for our whole nation, but to set the example for the rest of the world, because this is a global issue, but it starts with us. And like Jacqueline said, everything starts with our children and the kids.
Again, thank both of you for sharing this information, and it'll be on our website, if not tonight, early tomorrow morning.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for everything.
We really appreciate it. You have a Merry Christmas, and thank you for being a media outlet that covers such important topics.
Seriously.
You got it. All right, God bless both of you. Have a beautiful holiday.
You
God
too.
bless you.
God bless.
You too.
Happy holidays.
Thank you. Bye.
All right, bye.